A workplace lives and dies on the ability of its workers to, well, work together. Take WhatCulture, for instance. Most of the time, we're just one big happy family shooting the breeze about how bonkers Vince McMahon is. However, as with wrestling, one bad apple can ruin things for everyone. And that guy is Simon Miller. Of course, he seems nice on camera, but behind the scenes, he is a monster. I've seen him throw poor Adam Nicholas through a window for not making the light bounce off his muscles properly. How can he? There's so many of them. Nah, of course not. Simon Miller is one of the nicest guys in the world, as you'd expect. But these guys are the anti-Simon Millers of wrestling. I'm Adam Wilborn, and these are 10 wrestlers who were notoriously difficult to work with. Number 10, Loki. Across TNA and WWE, Loki wrestled under the names Senshi and Kaval respectively. These pseudonyms, both derived from the word warrior, paint an ironic portrait of the real man within. Key, considering anecdotal and disturbing in-ring evidence, fancies himself a real warrior of the simulated pro wrestling arena. Someone let the poor lad know. Key pulled out of Matt Riddle's Bloodsport earlier this year because he refused to job for a guy with 100% more real fight experience than himself. Because people wouldn't buy it? Bro. Number 9, Austin Aries. I'm struggling a bit with this entry because when we worked with my new best friend, he was nothing but nice to me. Then again, rewatching the end of Impact's recent Bound for Glory main event, where upon the bell ringing he shoots up, exposing his long match as a sham, spits at Johnny Impact and storms out of the promotion, yeah, he does come across as a bit of a dick. Then again, the greatest man that ever lived becoming the guy who no-sells doing jobs because he's pissy would make Vince Russo feel things he hasn't felt for a long time. The long and short of it is that Aries sees himself not as the excellent pro wrestler he is, but rather a legitimate difference maker. That nickname of his is no work. Aries believes he is a special talent, and screw you for questioning his genius. Yeah, I can relate to that. Number 8, Sid. Sid meets 3 criterion for this list. Number 1, he was difficult to work with because, as an in-ring performer, he was deeply limited. Please don't hurt me, Mr. Vicious. Number 2, he was difficult to work with because he was a hothead with delusions of grandeur. Adam Cleary. For example, in 1991, he told Brian Pillman that he was a pretty boy who didn't know how to work. So Pillman stood up to him. Sid backed down and retreated from the scene. But he returned to it with a squeegee in his hand. He chose a better weapon for his next backstage battle in 1993 with Arn Anderson. He chose a pair of scissors. That went well. And number 3, he was difficult to work with on a literal level because he was just so fond of leaving companies to play softball. Maybe he really does have half the brain that you do. Number 7, Dynamite Kid. The Dynamite Kid did nothing by halves. The most intense among us rarely do. The kid injected his own flesh and blood in the arse with milk. He also tore a ligament in a young Mick Foley's jaw with a lariat. After all, if you couldn't keep up with him, tough titties. That was your problem. He pooed in bags and cut up the gear of his fellow performers. He tormented Jake the Snake Roberts' living gimmick. He spiked referees with laxatives out of pure jealousy and went stiffer than even his demented Norm against certain opponents in what basically amounted to genuine hate crimes. To summarise, he was a However, nothing any of these men endured is comparable to what he's put his poor wife through. Ritually, he'd wake her up in the middle of the night and hold a shotgun to her chin. One day, it'll be loaded, he said. Sleep well, love. Number 6, Bruiser Brody. At once a dream and a nightmare for promoters, Bruiser Brody was an original. Brody hated promoters, and they in turn hated him. Promoters booked him begrudgingly, and he leveraged his immense drawing power in the East to hike his price in the West. He didn't merely make promoters pay through the nose though, he made some of them pay an even steeper price. For, depending on his erratic whims, he would survey the promotion's hometown star, decide on the spot whether he fancied cooperating, and then sometimes just not. I mean, we've all been there, right lads? There was no reasoning with Brody, much less working with him. Number 5. Ole Anderson. Ole Anderson, to borrow his bluntless, was a miserable sack of shit. An incredible heel and genius wrestling mind, nonetheless, he was a miserable sack of shit. Those aren't the words of your dear presenter, they are the words of the men who worked with him. The men to a man that he alienated more than Jules at the WhatCulture Christmas party. Nothing makes him happy, Bobby Heenan once said of him. Burying him with his next level wit, Heenan described Ole as the kind of guy with a size 10 foot who wears size 9 shoes. A consummate pro in the ring, Ole's inclusion differs from the rest. People didn't merely hate him, they feared him. No less a badass than Arn Anderson was intimidated by Ole, who referred to him as the one guy I was most afraid of in the wrestling business. A true heel you can trawl through YouTube all day long, and you'll not find anybody with a good word to say about him. Number 4. New Jack. Difficult is a euphemism. New Jack wasn't so much difficult to work with as he was a mortal danger to certain opponents. If there was a big wrestling WhatsApp group, New Jack would be the one who sends the weird videos of people getting really hurt. Look at his bloody face. The overeager minor chancer Eric Kulas wanted New Jack to give him some colour to put him over in the disturbing mass transit incident of November '96. You got it, mate. Jack, with a sociopathic relish, met that request by opening up Kulas's forehead and arteries with a surgical scalpel. New Jack also contrived to make a 40 feet high scaffold bump onto several wooden tables even more dangerous by simply overshooting his trajectory in retribution for the assorted injuries he suffered at ECW Living Dangerously 2000. He wanted, apparently, to murder Vic Grimes. Completing an unholy trinity, New Jack did equally well not to murder the then 69-year-old hardcore wrestling pioneer Gypsy Joe in 2003. This crime was in retribution for Joe laying it in a bit stiff. Well, he punched him square in the face full force, which formally classifies Joe as the most batshit insane wrestler in all of recorded history. Congratulations! Here's your award. Number 3. Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior was an incredibly popular pro wrestler in a very popular time for pro wrestling. He never let anybody, least of himself, forget that. A hyper-muscled force of pure energy flecked in dazzling neon, the Warrior was calibrated to pop the WWF's youthful golden era audience. And he was such a legendarily abrasive figure behind the curtain that the boys were calibrated to pop him in the face. Rick Rude pleaded with the Warrior to ease up on him in their 1989 program. Warrior responded to this request with an apocryphal, "I don't have to, I'm the Warrior." This displeased Rude. It's not known whether Warrior shook his head violently from side to side, though it's quite likely given how much he lived the gimmick. It also adds much comedy value to the visual of Rude decking Warrior to the floor. This anecdote is a particular indictment of Warrior's character, in that he wasn't clueless so much as reckless in the ring. An absolute bastard outside of it too, he pleaded with Vince McMahon in an infamous 1991 leaked letter to recognise him as the one because he was so committed to, quote, total jugular vein popping yelling at all times. I suppose he's not wrong. Number 2. Hulk Hogan. Well, that doesn't work for the Hulkster, brother. Yeah. Very little did. Hulk Hogan worked a simple routine. His opponents were to wrestle a safe conventional match, after which they were to stare at the lights. Job done. When he eventually was persuaded to do a clean job to put over the Warrior at WrestleMania 6, he did the old 3.00000001 kickout bit, pointed to the sky, and called out, "You!" You being God for failing all the little Hulkamaniacs. Cool? No doubt, no doubt, no doubt. Bret Hart made him question Hulkamania's greatness at WrestleMania 9, but there was never any question of Hogan putting him over as a transitional champion. That didn't work for the Hulkster, brother. Neither did Vader's stiff ring style, Ric Flair's chances of a rematch, Jeff Jarrett, Shawn Michaels, or Randy Orton, the latter two of which were inexcusable ego trips. Hogan showed even more cheek than he did in his gruesome Wrecking Ball parody at Bash at the Beach 2000. That's why this company's in the state it's in, he said, because of bullshit like this. Though WCW's infrastructure was an omni-shambles, Hogan's 24-inch political muscle hardly helped bring forward much-needed creative change. Still though, what about that leg drop though, eh? Number 1. Shawn Michaels. Throughout the 90s, the Heartbreak Kid was a paranoid, nasty, egotistical nightmare to share a locker room with. A saboteur allergic to dropping titles cleanly, Michaels was the Stampy of the WWF. A jerk without a cause. Of Michaels' first 10 reigns with Assorted Federation Gold, he dropped no less than 7 straps under dubious circumstances. Unable to function as a team with Diesel, a forfeit, a compound fracture of a smile. Michaels' excuses were almost impressive in their gall. Why was Michaels allowed to behave in the manner he did? Because he was an absolutely sensational, try not to think about Crown Jewel, dynamite in-ring performer who threw your heart into your mouth with every awe-inspiring bump and story beat. Even Bret Hart couldn't rate him 4 out of 10. His professional brilliance was undeniable to the man who personally despised him the most. Despite all that, he still sounds like a bit of a nightmare though, eh? And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And you can check out some more of our recent videos here. Thanks for watching. I've been Adam from WhatCulture, and I'll see you soon.